My name is Camila, and at 39 years old, I never imagined I would face such an impossible choice. 2 years ago, I made the worst mistake of my life when I believed my daughter Lily's lie and forced my son Jason to leave our home. Now, in a cruel twist of fate, Lily needs a kidney transplant to survive, and Jason refuses to save her. The devastating consequences of a single lie have left our family shattered beyond recognition. Before I continue my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to hear more stories about how one decision can change everything. Now let me take you back to where it all began. Life hasn't been easy since I lost my husband David in a car accident 8 years ago. At 31, I suddenly found myself alone with a 11-year-old Jason and a 9-year-old Lily. The transition from being a team to a solo parent was the hardest thing I had ever experienced. Working as a hospital administrator in Boston provided a steady income, but the hours were long and unpredictable. There were many nights when I would come home exhausted, only to find Jason had already prepared dinner for himself and Lily finished his homework and started helping his sister with hers. He stepped up in ways no child should have to, becoming my rock through the darkest days of grief. Jason was always the quieter of my 2 children, thoughtful and introspective. He had his father's analytical mind and gentle spirit. While other teenage boys were getting into trouble, Jason spent his weekends volunteering at the local animal shelter or tutoring younger students. His teachers constantly praised his academic abilities and work ethic. Lily was my social butterfly. Outgoing and charismatic, she made friends easily and lit up any room she entered. But she also had a flair for drama that sometimes crossed into exaggeration. Where Jason was content with quiet acknowledgement, Lily craved attention and validation. I tried to balance my time between them, but looking back, I can see how often Jason's reliability meant his needs were overlooked. I remember the day Jason received his first award for academic excellence. His science project on renewable energy had won first place in the state competition. While I beamed with pride at the ceremony, I noticed Lily sitting with her arms crossed, rolling her eyes whenever someone congratulated her brother. At the time, I dismissed it as normal sibling rivalry, but it was one of many warning signs I failed to see. As the years passed, our little family developed routines that kept us functioning. Sunday brunches where we would talk about our week. Movie nights with homemade popcorn. Annual camping trips to the White Mountains. Despite our loss, we found ways to create new memories and move forward together. At least that's what I thought. The reality was more complicated. I relied too heavily on Jason for emotional support. He became my confidant, the person I discussed adult problems with when I should have protected him from those burdens. Meanwhile, Lily watched this special relationship grow between her brother and me, feeding a resentment I was blind to. When Lily entered high school, her behavior became increasingly rebellious. She started missing curfew, her grades slipped, and she became secretive about her friends. I tried talking to her, but our conversations usually ended in shouting matches. I blamed it on typical teenage rebellion, never considering there might be deeper issues at play. Jason, meanwhile, was thriving. By his senior year, he had maintained a perfect GPA and was applying to Ivy League schools. When his acceptance letter from Yale arrived, along with a substantial scholarship, I couldn't have been prouder. He was breaking the cycle, achieving things neither his father nor I had the opportunity to pursue. The night we celebrated his acceptance, I remember Lily barely touched her food at the special dinner I had prepared. When I asked if everything was okay, she plastered on a smile and said she was just tired. Jason, ever perceptive, offered to help her with an upcoming school project later that weekend. She declined, making an excuse about plans with friends. Looking back at those final weeks before everything fell apart, I search for clues I might have missed. Were there conversations I should have had? Questions I should have asked? It all seemed so normal at the time, Jason was preparing for graduation. Lily was finishing her sophomore year, and I was juggling work while planning for Jason's college expenses. There was nothing to suggest the bomb that was about to detonate in our lives. Nothing to prepare me for how one lie would destroy everything we'd built together. The day that changed our lives forever was a Wednesday in May. I had left work early because of a migraine, something that rarely happened. When I walked into the house at 3:30 instead of my usual 6 o'clock, I heard sobbing coming from Lily's room. I found her curled up on her bed, crying so hard she could barely catch her breath. When I rushed to comfort her, she initially pulled away, saying she never wanted me to find out. My heart raced as I imagined all the terrible possibilities. Was she pregnant? Had she been bullied or assaulted? What she finally told me was so unexpected, so horrifying, that for a moment I couldn't process her words. Jason has pictures, she sobbed. Inappropriate photos of my friends on his computer. I saw them when he left his laptop open. When I confronted him about it, he got angry and threatened me not to tell anyone. I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. This couldn't be right. Not Jason. Not my responsible, kind-hearted son, who had never given me a moment of worry. "I need to see these pictures, Lily," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. She grabbed her phone, her hands shaking as she pulled up screenshots she claimed to have taken from Jason's computer. There were indeed images of girls who appeared to be around Lily's age in swimwear, along with what seemed to be a folder labeled with her friends' names. "He has more much worse ones," she whispered. But I was too scared to take more screenshots. He almost caught me. A part of me still couldn't believe it. This didn't align with anything I knew about my son. But the evidence was right there on Lily's phone, and her fear seemed genuine. As a mother, my instinct to protect my child kicked in fiercely. But which child? The one allegedly violating others' privacy, or the one feeling violated and threatened? When Jason came home from his after-school job at the local library, I confronted him immediately. I can still see the confusion on his face when I showed him the screenshots. "Mom, I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his voice rising with panic. "I don't have any photos like that. Someone must have used my computer or these are fake." His defensive tone and flushed face made him appear guilty to my eyes, though now I recognize it as the natural reaction of someone falsely accused. I demanded to see his laptop, which he handed over without hesitation. While I found no such folder immediately visible, Lily insisted he must have deleted it after she discovered it. The argument escalated quickly. Jason became increasingly frustrated as I questioned him while Lily maintained her story with tears streaming down her face. When Jason suggested Lily was lying, I snapped. "Why would your sister make up something like this?" I demanded. "What possible reason could she have? I don't know, but it's not true." Jason shouted, his face red with anger and hurt. "Mom, you've known me my entire life. How can you believe I'm capable of something like this?" But I was blinded by Lily's performance and the screenshot evidence. When Jason couldn't explain the screenshots, I made the most catastrophic decision of my life. I can't have someone in this house who disrespects girls like that and then lies about it, I said coldly. Either admit what you've done and agree to counseling, or you need to leave. The look on Jason's face still haunts me every night. It was as if something broke inside him, a fundamental trust that could never be repaired. He stared at me for what felt like an eternity, tears welling in his eyes, but refusing to fall. "You really believe I'm capable of this?" he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's not even a question for you." When I didn't respond, he nodded slowly, as if accepting a painful truth. "I'll pack my things," he said. I watched in stunned silence as he walked upstairs. Lily remained on the couch, still crying softly, but with an expression I can't quite describe when I look back on it now. Was there a hint of satisfaction behind those tears? I was too emotionally overwhelmed to notice. Jason packed methodically, taking only essential clothes, his laptop, and a few personal items. He left behind trophies, photographs, books all the evidence of his 18 years in our home. As he carried his bags to the door, I felt a moment of doubt, a voice screaming inside me to stop this madness. But Lily stood beside me trembling, and I wrapped my arm around her protectively. At the door, Jason turned to look at me one last time. "Someday, you'll learn the truth," he said quietly. "But it will be too late." Then he walked out, refusing my offer of money or help finding a place to stay. I learned later he went directly to his best friend Mark's house, whose parents took him in without question. The days that followed were surreal. Neighbors and family friends who heard about the situation took sides. Some supported my decision to protect Lily, while others couldn't believe Jason was capable of such behavior. The whispers and judgment only added to the stress of the situation. I justified my decision to myself repeatedly. I was protecting Lily and potentially her friends. I was teaching Jason there were consequences for unacceptable behavior. I was being a responsible parent. But even as I told myself these things, a small voice of doubt began to grow in the back of my mind. The first few weeks after Jason left passed in a strange, uncomfortable haze. Our house, once filled with his quiet presence, felt eerily empty. The spot at the dinner table where he always sat remained vacant, a constant reminder of his absence. I found myself setting 3 places for meals out of habit, only to remove the extra plate with a pang of sadness. Lily, however, seemed to blossom in the wake of her brother's departure. She stayed out later, invited friends over more frequently, and adopted a casualness about house rules that was entirely new. When I mentioned her 11 o'clock curfew, she would shrug and say, "It's not like Jason is waiting up for me anymore." The comment struck me as odd, each time a small red flag I continuously ignored. Night after night, I lay awake questioning my decision. Had I acted too hastily? Should I have investigated further? The doubt gnawed at me, preventing restful sleep. I would reach for my phone in the darkness, composing text messages to Jason that I rarely sent. The few I did dispatch went unanswered, as did my calls and voicemails. Through mutual friends, I learned that Jason was staying with his best friend Mark's family. They had apparently converted their basement into a bedroom for him without hesitation. Mark had been Jason's friend since elementary school, and his parents had always treated Jason like another son. I felt grateful he had somewhere safe to go, but the fact that another family had taken in my son, while I had cast him out, filled me with a shame I couldn't articulate. I received an email from Yale 2 weeks after Jason left. He had deferred his scholarship for a year, citing personal reasons. The prestigious future we'd celebrated was now on hold, and I couldn't ignore my role in that decision. I printed the email and placed it on his bed, a private acknowledgement of the consequences of that fateful day. Lily's academic performance, meanwhile, took a concerning dive. Her end-of-year report card showed she had barely passed most of her classes. When I tried to discuss it with her, she became defensive. "I'm dealing with trauma, Mom," she said, using the same vocabulary I'd heard from her therapist. "You can't expect me to focus on school right now." I backed off, not wanting to cause her more distress. But something about her response felt rehearsed, almost calculated to end the conversation. It was the first time I consciously recognized a manipulation tactic from my daughter, though it wouldn't be the last. A month after Jason left, I attempted to reach him through Mark. I caught Mark outside his summer job at the local grocery store, hoping for any information about my son. "He's working 2 jobs, Mark told me, his usually friendly demeanor noticeably cooler. "He's saving up for his own place and for college next year." "Is he okay?" I asked, my voice breaking. Mark looked at me with an expression that made me feel 2 inches tall. "No, Mrs. Winters, he isn't okay. His mom kicked him out for something he didn't do." "How would you be?" Before I could respond, Mark walked away, leaving me standing alone in the parking lot with my groceries and my growing doubt. It was around this time that I began noticing inconsistencies in Lily's story. She mentioned details that contradicted her original account, or added new elements that seemed designed to reinforce her narrative. When I gently questioned these discrepancies, she would become emotional and accuse me of not believing her. The first major crack in her story appeared when I overheard her on the phone with a friend, laughing about how she'd gotten out of a test by claiming to be traumatized by discovering her brother's inappropriate behavior. There was a callousness to her tone that made my skin crawl. Then came the journal entry. I wasn't snooping. I had been collecting laundry from her room when a notebook fell from her desk. It lay open to a page dated a week before the incident with Jason. Lily had written about her frustration that I always took Jason's side, how she was tired of being the invisible child, and how she wished she could have all my attention for once. There was nothing explicitly incriminating in those words, but they painted a picture of jealousy and resentment I hadn't fully acknowledged. When I asked Lily about these feelings, trying to create a space for honest conversation, she snatched the journal from my hands. "You're reading my private thoughts now," she snapped. "I guess I know whose side you're really on." Her defensive reaction only intensified my suspicions. I began reviewing the evidence that had convinced me to banish my son. The screenshots Lily had shown me suddenly seemed suspicious. Why would Jason, a tech-savvy young man, leave such material openly visible on his laptop? Why would he create an easily identifiable folder with her friends' names? I received an unexpected call from Mark's mother, Janet, 5 months after Jason had left. She had been a close friend before the incident, but our relationship had become strained in the aftermath. "Camila, I think you should know that Jason cries in his sleep," she said without preamble. "My husband and I can hear him through the vents. He keeps saying, 'Mom, why didn't you believe me?' over and over. That boy is heartbroken, not guilty." Her words pierced through me like physical pain. I thanked her for telling me and for taking care of my son. After hanging up, I sobbed until I had no tears left, the full weight of what I might have done wrong crushing down on me. 6 months passed with no contact from Jason. No birthday card, no response to Christmas gifts I sent through Mark. Nothing. It was as if he had erased me from his life as completely as I had erased him from our home. And still, the truth remained elusive, hovering just beyond my reach, like a word on the tip of my tongue. The truth revealed itself on a Sunday afternoon in November, nearly 7 months after Jason had left our home. Lily had gone to the mall with friends, leaving her phone charging on the kitchen counter. When it chimed with an incoming text, I glanced over instinctively. The preview message on the lock screen made my blood run cold. From Alyssa. "Still can't believe you got away with that lie about Jason. Your mom really kicked him out over fake pics, savage." My hands trembled as I picked up the phone. I had never invaded Lily's privacy before, but in that moment, I knew I needed to see the rest of that conversation. Her phone was unlocked, her one oversight in an otherwise carefully constructed deception. The text exchange with her friend Alyssa confirmed my worst nightmare. Lily had created the fake screenshots using photo editing software, deliberately framed her brother, and manipulated me into believing her elaborate lie. Their conversation detailed how she'd been planning it for weeks, waiting for the right moment to execute her plan. "Alyssa, but why did you want him gone so bad? Lily Mom always took his side. He was the perfect child, and I was invisible. Plus, with him gone, I can do whatever I want. Mom is so easy to manipulate when it's just us." I sank to the floor, phone still in hand, overcome with nausea and horror at what I'd done. By the time Lily returned home, I had composed myself enough to confront her with the evidence. She stood in our living room, shopping bag still in hand, as I held up her phone with the damning messages displayed. For a moment, she attempted to maintain her lie, claiming Alyssa was confused or that I was misinterpreting the conversation. But when I scrolled through months of similar exchanges, the truth became undeniable. It wasn't supposed to go this far, she finally admitted, tears streaming down her face. I just wanted him gone for a little while. I thought he'd stay with Mark for a week, you'd realize you missed him and he'd come back. But then it worked too well and I couldn't take it back. I just sat there staring at my daughter, as if seeing her for the first time. Who was this person who could meticulously plot to destroy her brother's life out of simple jealousy? How had I raised a child capable of such calculated cruelty? I was tired of being your second choice. Lily continued, her voice rising. Jason this, Jason that. His grades, his college, his future. What about me? When was the last time you looked at me with the same pride in your eyes? Her words struck a painful chord. Had I truly made her feel so overlooked that she believed destroying her brother was the only way to gain my attention? The realization of my failure as a mother to both my children hit me with crushing force. After my initial shock subsided, rage took its place, a primal, consuming anger unlike anything I'd ever experienced. I screamed until my voice gave out, releasing months of guilt, doubt, and heartache. Lily cowered on the couch, perhaps truly understanding the magnitude of what she'd done for the first time. When I could speak again, I asked her a single question. Do you realize that you destroyed your brother's life because you were jealous? She had no answer, just tears and broken apologies that seemed hollow in the face of such betrayal. My priority became finding Jason. I tried calling Mark again, but my calls went straight to voicemail. In desperation, I hired a private investigator using money I'd been saving for home repairs. Within a week, he reported that Jason had moved to San Francisco, over 3,000 miles away from Boston. He was working at a tech startup, having apparently given up on his Yale scholarship entirely. I found Jason's Instagram account, which had been set to private since he left. The few public photos showed a thinner, harder version of my son. His smile didn't reach his eyes in any of the images. According to the investigator, Jason was sharing an apartment with 2 co-workers and had cut ties with almost everyone from his past in Boston, except for Mark. Without allowing myself time to reconsider, I booked a flight to San Francisco. I didn't tell Lily where I was going or why, just that I would be gone for a few days and that her Aunt Sophia would be staying with her. The truth was, I could barely look at my daughter without feeling physically ill. Jason lived in a small apartment in the Mission District. I waited outside his building for hours before I saw him approaching after work. The moment he recognized me, his entire body tensed. He looked like he might run, but instead, he stopped several feet away from me. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. "I know the truth," I said simply. Lily lied about everything. I found proof on her phone. He stared at me for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. "Great. Only took you 7 months to figure out what I told you from the beginning, despite my rehearsed apologies and explanations." Jason refused to forgive me. He listened silently as I tearfully recounted discovering Lily's deception, my face wet with tears, while his remained dry and impassive. "You chose to believe a lie over knowing your own son," he finally said. "You looked me in the eye and decided I was guilty without any real evidence. What kind of mother does that?" His words cut deeper than any knife could have, because he was right. I'd failed him in the most fundamental way possible. "I would do anything to take it back," I pleaded. "Please, Jason, please come home." "That's not my home anymore," he replied. "I have a life here now. I had to build one after you destroyed my old one." He turned and walked into his building without looking back. I stood on the sidewalk until long after the sun set, hoping he'd return, but he never did. The next day, I flew back to Boston alone, more devastated than ever. When I returned home, I enrolled Lily in intensive therapy. We also began family counseling, though it felt inadequate given the magnitude of what had happened. Lily seemed genuinely remorseful, but I struggled to trust anything she said or did. The damage she had caused seemed irreparable, and our relationship would never be the same. As for Jason, he had made it clear he wanted nothing to do with either of us. I respected his boundaries, but sent a letter each month updating him on my life and expressing my endless regret. I never knew if he read them. A year passed with this new normal. Jason remained in California. Lily and I attended weekly therapy, and I carried the weight of my terrible mistake every day. Then Lily began showing symptoms that couldn't be ignored. It started with fatigue that she dismissed as stress from junior year. Then came the swollen ankles and hands which she hid by wearing baggy clothes. When I finally noticed her puffy face one morning, I insisted on taking her to our family doctor immediately. Dr. Patterson ran several tests, growing increasingly concerned with each result. Lily's blood pressure was dangerously high for a 17-year-old, and protein in her urine suggested kidney problems. He referred us to a nephrologist for further testing. Dr. Mara, the kidney specialist, delivered the devastating news after a week of comprehensive tests. Lily had end-stage renal disease. Her kidneys were failing rapidly, and without intervention, her prognosis was grim. How is this possible? She's only 17, I stammered, gripping Lily's hand as she sat beside me, uncharacteristically quiet. Dr. Mara explained that Lily had likely been born with a congenital kidney abnormality that had gone undetected. The condition had progressed silently until reaching a critical point where symptoms became impossible to ignore. "Has anyone in your family had kidney issues?" he asked. I shook my head, then hesitated. "Not that I know of. My husband died years ago, so I can't ask about his family history." Later that night, I called David's sister, who confirmed that their father had died from kidney failure in his 40s. This genetic link might have given us warning if David had lived to share it. Lily began dialysis 3 times a week. The vibrant, manipulative teenager who had destroyed her brother's life was replaced by a pale, exhausted girl tethered to a machine that did what her kidneys no longer could. Despite everything she had done, my heart broke watching her suffer. Dr. Mara didn't sugarcoat Lily's situation during our follow-up appointment. While dialysis would keep her alive, it wasn't a long-term solution for someone so young. A kidney transplant was her best hope for a normal life expectancy and quality of life. I immediately volunteered to be tested as a donor, but my hopes were dashed when the results came back. I wasn't a compatible match. Neither were David's sister or any of our close relatives who agreed to be tested. That was when Dr. Mara asked the question I had been dreading. "Do you have any other children who might be willing to get tested?" "I have a son," I admitted, "but we haven't spoken in over a year. It's complicated." The doctor nodded sympathetically but pressed on. "Siblings often make excellent donors due to genetic similarities. Would you be willing to at least ask him?" The irony was painful. The son who Lily had banished from our lives through her lies might now be her only hope for survival. The universe had a cruel sense of justice. That night, after helping Lily to bed, exhausted from her dialysis session, I made the hardest phone call of my life. Jason's number had changed in the past year, but Mark had reluctantly given me his new contact information after I explained the dire circumstances. The phone rang 5 times before going to voicemail. I left a brief message asking him to call me back about an urgent family matter. An hour later, my phone rang. "What is it?" Jason asked, without greeting, his voice cold and distant through the line. I took a deep breath and explained Lily's condition as clinically as I could, trying to keep my emotions in check. He listened silently as I detailed her diagnosis, the failed donor matches, and the doctor's recommendation that siblings be tested. When I finished, the silence stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. "Let me get this straight," he finally said. You want me to undergo surgery to save the person who deliberately destroyed my life? The same person you chose over me? His voice held no emotion, which was somehow worse than if he'd been angry. It was as if he was discussing strangers, not his mother and sister. I know I have no right to ask, I whispered. But she's dying, Jason. That's not my problem, he replied. You both made your choice 2 years ago about who mattered in your family. Now you can live with it. The call ended abruptly, leaving me clutching the phone in the dark kitchen, fresh waves of guilt crashing over me. I couldn't blame Jason for his response. It was perfectly rational, given what he'd endured. But rational or not, it meant Lily might not survive. Lily's condition deteriorated over the next 2 weeks. The doctors adjusted her dialysis schedule to 4 times weekly, but she continued to lose weight and strength. When she developed a dangerous infection at her catheter site, she was hospitalized. Watching her fight for her life in the hospital bed, hooked to machines and monitors, I made the decision to fly to California once more. I needed to look Jason in the eyes when I begged for my daughter's life. The San Francisco morning was shrouded in fog when I arrived at Jason's apartment building for the second time in our fractured history. This time, I had called ahead. His girlfriend Maya had answered his phone, and after hearing my explanation, convinced Jason to at least see me. The apartment was small but neatly kept. 3 framed computer science certificates hung on one wall, the new life Jason had built from the ruins of his old one. Maya, a petite woman with kind eyes and a protective demeanor, greeted me at the door with cautious courtesy. He's finishing a work call, she explained. He almost canceled when he saw your flight confirmation, but I talked him into at least hearing you out. Thank you, I said sincerely. I don't deserve even this much. No, you don't, she agreed bluntly. But this isn't just about you anymore. When Jason emerged from the bedroom, he looked nothing like the boy who had left our home 2 years earlier. At 21, he had grown broader in the shoulders, his jawline more defined. But the most significant change was in his eyes. They were harder now, wary and guarded in a way that broke my heart all over again. Maya squeezed his hand before grabbing her purse. He'll be at the cafe down the street, she told him. Take your time. Then to me, don't make him regret this. After she left, Jason gestured to the small dining table but remained standing himself, maintaining physical distance between us. How is she? He asked, surprising me with his first concern being for Lily. Not good, I answered honestly. The infection is under control, but her overall condition is declining. The doctors say she has months at most without a transplant. He nodded, his expression unreadable. And no other donors have matched none so far. They've tested everyone we could think of. A heavy silence filled the apartment. Through the window, I could see the fog beginning to lift, revealing glimpses of the bay beyond. This city that had become Jason's refuge was beautiful in its own way, so different from the tree-lined streets of our Boston suburb. You realize what you're asking, right? He finally said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. You want me to undergo major surgery for someone who deliberately set out to destroy my life. Someone who succeeded in destroying my life. The dam finally broke. 2 years of contained anger and hurt poured out as Jason paced the small living room, his voice rising with each word. Do you have any idea what you've cost me? He demanded. I lost my scholarship after deferring for a year. Yale doesn't hold spots forever. I had to drop out of college completely and find work instead. My dream of becoming a research scientist, gone. All my friends except Mark gone. My family gone. Each word was a knife to my heart, but I deserved every cut. This was the conversation we should have had 2 years ago. The pain he should have been allowed to express before being cast out. The worst part, he continued, his voice breaking slightly, is that you never even questioned it. You never said, wait, this doesn't sound like my son. You never gave me the benefit of the doubt. You just threw me away. I know, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Nothing I say can undo that betrayal. I failed you in the worst possible way, and I will regret it every day for the rest of my life. But please, don't punish Lily for my failures as a mother. He laughed bitterly. Lily isn't suffering for your failures. She's suffering for her own choices. Actions have consequences, Mom. Isn't that what you taught me? Before I could respond, Maya returned with 3 coffees. She had clearly been giving us space, but since the conversation had reached a critical juncture, she placed a gentle hand on Jason's shoulder, and I saw him lean into her touch, almost imperceptibly. What are you thinking? She asked him quietly. I'm thinking I wish I'd never answered the phone, he replied, but there was less conviction in his voice. Maya turned to me. Jason told me everything about what happened. I understand why you're here, and I understand why he's resistant. But maybe we could start with just the testing, to see if he's even a match before making any decisions? Her practical suggestion cut through the emotional tension. Jason looked at her for a long moment before nodding slowly. I'll get tested, he agreed, his eyes still on Maya. But I'm not committing to anything beyond that. It was more than I had dared to hope for. I expressed my gratitude through fresh tears, but Jason cut me off with a raised hand. Don't thank me yet, he said coldly. Even if I'm a match, I haven't decided if I'll go through with the donation. The testing process took 3 days. Jason went to a local hospital affiliated with Lily's medical team in Boston, providing blood samples and undergoing various screenings. I stayed in a nearby hotel, not wanting to impose on his space, but anxious to be nearby for the results. On the 3rd day, Dr. Maris' office called me. Jason's results had been expedited due to Lily's critical condition, and the news was both miraculous and terrifying. He was a perfect match, as close to ideal as siblings could be. When I met Jason at a small park near his apartment to share the news, his expression remained impassive. He already knew we both did. The hospital wouldn't have released his results to me without telling him first. So, what now? I asked tentatively. Now I decide whether I want to save the person who tried to ruin my life, he replied. Why should Mom give me one good reason why I should put myself through surgery and permanent loss of a kidney for Lily? I had prepared countless arguments for this moment. I could appeal to his compassion, remind him of the bond they once shared, as children emphasized that Lily was still young and deserved a chance to redeem herself. But sitting beside him on that park bench, watching a group of children play nearby, I realized none of those arguments mattered. This wasn't my decision to make. I can't give you a reason that would be enough, I admitted. If our positions were reversed, I don't know if I could do it either. All I can say is that whatever you decide, I'll respect it. He seemed surprised by my response, perhaps expecting more emotional manipulation. For the first time since it arrived, his expression softened slightly. I'll think about it, he said, standing to leave. But don't get your hopes up. I returned to Boston the next day, emotionally exhausted, but clinging to the slimmest thread of hope. Lily had been moved out of intensive care, but remained hospitalized. When I told her Jason had been tested and was a match, her reaction surprised me. He won't do it, she said quietly, staring at the ceiling. And I don't blame him. Her acceptance of potential death as consequences for her actions shook me deeply. The manipulative, self-centered girl who had orchestrated her brother's banishment had been replaced by someone capable of genuine remorse. I think he might, I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Lily turned to look at me, her face pale and drawn from months of illness. She seemed decades older than her 17 years. Mom, I need to write him a letter, she said suddenly. Even if he decides not to do it, I need him to know. Sorry for what I did. I brought her a notebook and pen from home the next day. She spent hours writing, crossing out, and rewriting pages. When she finally handed me the sealed envelope, her hands were trembling. "Make sure he gets this," she said, "even if he never wants to see me again." I mailed the letter along with one of my own, expressing one last time my profound regret and unconditional acceptance of whatever decision he made. Then came the hardest part, waiting while watching my daughter grow weaker each day. A week passed with no word from Jason. Lily took a dangerous turn, developing fluid in her lungs that required emergency intervention. As I sat beside her bed that night, listening to her labored breathing, I finally accepted that Jason wasn't coming. I couldn't blame him, but the realization that I would likely lose my daughter as punishment for my terrible mistake was almost unbearable. "I deserve this," Lily whispered through her oxygen mask, seemingly reading my thoughts. I destroyed our family with one lie. I took her hand, noticing how thin her fingers had become. "No matter what we've done," I said firmly, "neither of us deserves this, and neither does Jason. This isn't about punishment anymore." She drifted to sleep, her breathing still labored. I remained in the uncomfortable hospital chair, dozing fitfully. I was awakened at dawn by a nurse entering the room to check Lily's vitals. "There's someone asking for you at the nurse's station," she informed me quietly. "A young man." My heart leapt as I hurried down the corridor, hardly daring to hope. And there he was, Jason looking exhausted and uncertain, a duffel bag at his feet. "I read her letter," he said without preamble. "And yours." I nodded, afraid to speak and break whatever spell had brought him here. "I'm not doing this for you," he continued, his voice steady but quiet. "And I'm not really doing it for Lily either. I'm doing it because I refuse to be the person who chooses revenge over life. I won't let what happened to me define who I become." I covered my mouth to stifle a sob, overwhelmed by his presence and his words. He allowed me to embrace him briefly, his body stiff but not pulling away. The transplant surgery was scheduled for the following week. Lily cried when I told her Jason had arrived, but he requested not to see her until after the procedure. The doctors explained the process to both of them separately, outlining the risks and recovery expectations. On the morning of the surgery, I sat in the waiting room, alternating between prayer and silent tears. The procedure would take approximately 4 hours, both surgeries occurring simultaneously in adjoining operating rooms. I had never felt more helpless or more grateful. Dr. Mara emerged first, his surgical mask pulled down to reveal a tired smile. "Both surgeries were successful," he reported. Jason's kidney had been removed laparoscopically and transplanted into Lily without complications. They would both be monitored closely, but the initial signs were very positive. I was allowed to see them both in recovery. Lily was still unconscious, tubes and monitors surrounding her bed, but her color already looked better than it had in months. Jason's recovery room was just down the hall. He was awake, but groggy from anesthesia. "Thank you," I whispered, taking his hand carefully around the IV line. "I don't deserve a son like you." He squeezed my fingers weakly. "No, you don't." He murmured, the ghost of his old humor momentarily visible through the pain. "But you're stuck with me anyway." The weeks that followed were focused entirely on recovery. Jason was released from the hospital after 5 days, while Lily remained for 2 weeks to monitor for rejection of the new kidney. I split my time between them, helping Jason at the hotel room he'd booked near the hospital and sitting with Lily during her treatments. The first time they saw each other was 3 weeks after the transplant. Jason had agreed to a brief visit before returning to California. I held my breath as he entered Lily's hospital room, uncertain what this reunion would bring. Lily looked up from her bed, her eyes filling with tears at the sight of her brother. Her body was still frail, but the deadly pallor had been replaced by healthier color. Jason stood awkwardly at the foot of her bed, hands in his pockets. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it, she said softly. But thank you. He nodded, his expression guarded, but not hostile. How's it working? He asked, gesturing toward her midsection where his kidney now resided. Your kidney is an overachiever, she replied with a small smile. The doctors are impressed with how well it's functioning. Sounds about right, he said, the smallest hint of warmth creeping into his voice. They didn't discuss the past during that first meeting. That would come later in carefully moderated therapy sessions. But something fundamental had shifted. A door that had seemed permanently closed was now cracked open, allowing a sliver of possibility. Before leaving, Jason set clear boundaries for moving forward. He wasn't ready to forgive fully or to resume normal family relationships. He would return to San Francisco to continue his life there. But he would stay in contact primarily through email at first. I need time and space, he explained to me as I drove him to the airport. What happened didn't magically disappear because I donated a kidney. I understand, I assured him. Well, take this at whatever pace you set. I watched him walk through security, this son I had nearly lost forever, marveling at his capacity for compassion despite everything he'd endured. The journey ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time in 2 years, I felt something like hope. 1 year has passed since the transplant that saved my daughter's life and began the slow healing of our broken family. So much has changed, yet the consequences of that single lie still ripple through our lives in ways both visible and invisible. Lily recovered her physical health remarkably well. After months of rehabilitation and careful medication management, she returned to school to complete her senior year. The experience transformed her in ways I never could have predicted. The self-centered girl who had orchestrated her brother's banishment out of jealousy was gone, replaced by someone more thoughtful and genuinely remorseful. She now volunteers at the kidney dialysis center twice weekly, sitting with patients during their treatments, offering conversation and company during the long, tedious hours attached to the machines. At first, I wondered if this was just another performance, but her commitment has never wavered even on days when she's exhausted from school and her own medical appointments. Jason has begun rebuilding his interrupted education. After our family therapist helped facilitate a conversation with Yale, explaining the extraordinary circumstances of his deferral, they offered to reinstate a portion of his scholarship. With additional financial aid and the trust fund I created from my retirement savings, he plans to begin classes next fall. He continues to live in San Francisco, maintaining the independence he fought hard to establish. The startup where he works has offered him a flexible schedule that will allow him to work remotely while attending school. Maya, the girlfriend who helped convince him to get tested, remains an important part of his life and has visited Boston twice with him in the past year. Our family exists in a new configuration now. The blind trust and easy intimacy of before are gone, perhaps forever. In their place is something more cautious, but also more honest. We navigate each interaction with care, always mindful of the fragile trust we're rebuilding. Jason attends family events occasionally, now Christmas dinner, Lily's high school graduation, but he maintains clear boundaries. He stays in a hotel rather than our home. He limits his visits to a few days at most. He excuses himself when conversations become too intense or personal. I respect these boundaries, absolutely grateful for whatever time he chooses to share with us. Lily and Jason have their own relationship now, separate from me. They exchange emails regularly, and occasionally I hear Lily laughing on the phone with him. Their bond is different, more careful, more deliberate, but it exists. The fact that part of him literally lives within her creates a connection that neither can deny. As for me, I continue my own therapy, working through the guilt and self-recrimination that still wake me in the night. How could I have failed both my children so completely? Why didn't I see the signs of Lily's jealousy and resentment before they festered into destructive action? How could I have abandoned the son who had never given me reason to doubt him. These questions have no satisfying answers, only the painful recognition that even with the best intentions, we can make catastrophic mistakes as parents. The lesson I've learned most profoundly is about the danger of certainty. I was so certain I knew my children, so confident in my ability to discern truth from lies, that I never questioned my judgment until it was almost too late. Trust once shattered can never be fully restored to its original state. Like a broken vase carefully glued back together, the cracks remain visible, a permanent reminder of the damage done. But perhaps there's value in seeing those cracks and being reminded of our capacity for terrible mistakes and our responsibility to do better. If there is redemption in our story, it lies not in forgiveness freely given. That would be too simple, too neat for the messy reality of human relationships. Rather, it lies in the daily choice we each make to move forward, despite the pain, to rebuild what we can, while honoring the truth of what happened. Jason showed more courage and compassion than I had any right to expect when he donated his kidney to save his sister. Lily demonstrates genuine remorse through her actions rather than just her words. And I try every day to be worthy of the second chance I've been given with both my children. One lie nearly destroyed us all. The truth, painful as it was, gave us the opportunity to rebuild something real, if imperfect. And in that imperfection lies our most important family lesson, that honesty, however difficult, is the only foundation strong enough to bear the weight of love. So what do you think? Could you forgive a family member who betrayed your trust so deeply? Or if you were in my position, would you have done anything differently? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that even in our darkest moments, healing is possible if we're willing to face the truth.